In my 43 years on the bench here in Providence, I have looked into the eyes of thousands of defendants. I have seen fear. I have seen regret. I have seen desperation that comes from a lifetime of hardship. But on the morning of October 14, 2024, I saw something that chilled me to the very core. I looked into the eyes of a woman named Victoria Vance. Victoria Vance was not just any defendant. She was draped in Italian silk, exuding the kind of confidence only hundreds of millions of dollars can buy. Over $600 million. She had power, influence, and every material possession the world tells us to desire. And yet, she stood accused of a crime so shocking, so devoid of basic human decency, that the courtroom held its collective breath. It wasn't bank fraud. It wasn't embezzlement. It was far worse. She had let a living, breathing soul die over $800. $800. An amount she earned in roughly 12 seconds of interest. I thought I had seen the limits of arrogance in my courtroom. I was wrong. And that, my friends, is where this story begins, with wealth, cruelty, and a single moment that changed lives forever. What could someone with that much money possibly do to be facing criminal charges? Stick around, because the truth is more shocking than you could imagine. Before we dive in, let me ask you for a small favor. Where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to know who's joining me on this journey. And if you want to be part of something special, hit that subscribe button and help us reach our very first 100 subscribers. Your support means the world, and together, we can grow this channel into a place full of unforgettable stories. Every comment, every click, every subscriber, it truly matters. It was a typical New England autumn evening. The air was crisp, carrying the earthy scent of wet leaves and rain. The streetlights along Hope Street flickered on, one by one, casting long amber shadows across the sidewalk. A quiet, ordinary night, except for the tragedy that was about to unfold. Arthur Miller, a 72-year-old retired postal worker, was walking Buddy, his golden retriever. Buddy wasn't just a pet. He was family, the anchor in a life that had grown too quiet after the death of Arthur's wife, Martha, 4 years earlier. Every morning, Buddy nudged him out of bed. Every evening, Buddy kept him company as he strolled down familiar streets. Arthur's steps were steady, and Buddy stayed close, their routine unbroken. Arthur wore his reflective vest, Buddy was on a short leash. They followed the rules. They trusted the world to do the same. Then, at exactly 6:30 p.m., a sound shattered the calm. It wasn't a roar, but a high-pitched whine. The scream of a twin-turbo engine pushed far beyond safe limits in a 30 miles per hour residential zone. A silver luxury sedan appeared, glinting under the streetlights. Behind the wheel was Victoria Vance, eyes fixed on the glow of her phone. The car struck Arthur lightly, sending him staggering. But Buddy wasn't so lucky. He was thrown violently against a parked van, landing with a sickening thud. Arthur's panic was immediate. "Buddy," he cried, crawling to his companion. His voice cracked in terror as he reached for him. And that, my viewers, is when the first question arises: if someone with that much wealth witnessed this, what would they do? The car stops, the door opens, but what Victoria does next will leave you questioning the very nature of human decency. Victoria Vance stepped out of her car, heels clicking on the wet pavement. She didn't run to Arthur. She didn't run to Buddy. Instead, she walked slowly to the front of her car, ran a hand over a scratch on the bumper, and cursed under her breath. Then she pulled a business card from her purse and flicked it at Arthur. It landed in a puddle a few feet away. Arthur, racked with pain and desperation, begged her. "Please. Please help me get him to the vet. He's hurt badly." Victoria glanced at her watch. She sighed. "Call my assistant about the damages to my car," she said casually. And with that, she climbed back into her car and drove away, leaving Arthur and his dying dog in the misty rain. Arthur managed to flag down a passerby to help carry Buddy to the nearest emergency vet. Dr. Chen examined Buddy urgently. Immediate surgery was required. $800 up front. Arthur had $40. Frantically, he called the number on the card Victoria had thrown at him. He pleaded. He promised to pay back every penny. She hung up. Buddy died 45 minutes later, his head in Arthur's lap. Arthur sobbed. Can you imagine watching the life of your best friend slip away, knowing just a few $100s could have saved him? I want you to pause for a moment and think, if this happened to you, what would you do? Comment below and let me know where you're watching from. Would you forgive someone like Victoria, or would you demand justice? This is only the beginning. The courtroom showdown will test the limits of morality, privilege, and justice. And you won't believe what happens when Victoria faces Judge Caprio. The doors of the municipal courtroom swung open, and all eyes turned toward Victoria Vance. She didn't just enter, she made an entrance. A cream-colored silk suit hugged her frame, more expensive than the entirety of Arthur Miller's annual pension. Oversized sunglasses hid her eyes, and a designer handbag rested effortlessly in the crook of her arm. As she walked past the prosecutor and the gallery, she typed rapidly on her phone. She didn't glance at Arthur, didn't glance at me, didn't glance at anyone. The court fell into an uneasy silence. Whispers died, and even the air seemed to hold its breath. I called out, my voice steady, "State your name for the record." Victoria finally looked up, sliding her sunglasses down just slightly. "Victoria Vance, Your Honor. I have a board meeting in Manhattan at 2 o'clock. Can we expedite this? I'm prepared to pay whatever the ticket is." The courtroom tensed. A ticket? A simple infraction? Not a criminal proceeding. Not a matter of life and death, not the cold arrogance of someone who let a living being die over $800. I leaned forward, my voice dropping an octave. "Miss Vance, you are charged with reckless driving, leaving the scene of an accident with injury, and animal cruelty resulting in death. This is not a ticket." Her response was dismissive, almost bored. "It was just a dog, Your Honor. My lawyers sent a check. Market rate for a mongrel is roughly $50. I think I'm being generous." Whispers erupted. Gasps echoed. Arthur buried his face in his hands, the memory of Buddy too raw. And Victoria, still typing on her phone, barely seemed to notice. I leaned back in my chair and studied her. Over 4 decades, I had seen arrogance. But this was something else. "Miss Vance," I said slowly, "look at Arthur Miller. Look at the man whose best friend you killed. Show some humanity. Say one word, sorry." She shrugged, inspected her manicure, and spoke with cold precision. "I don't apologize for success. I don't apologize for accidents. He was old, the dog was in the road. How much to make this go away?" The courtroom froze. Silence pressed against the walls, suffocating in its weight. Arthur's sobs filled the space. And then, she leaned slightly forward, her voice almost a hiss. "You don't understand, do you? I own people like you. I can buy this courthouse and turn it into a parking garage." Even in my decades on the bench, I had never encountered such audacity. Every eye in the courtroom widened. Every breath seemed to pause. She believed her wealth made her untouchable. I took a deep breath. I had learned over the years that anger rarely serves justice, but the fire inside me kindled. "Miss Vance," I said calmly, "your checkbook cannot buy morality. In this courtroom, we earn justice through accountability." Her derisive laugh echoed through the chamber. "Oh, please. Everyone has a price. If the old man wants more money, fine. I'll give him $5,000. That should cover 10 dogs. He should thank me." I leaned forward, voice firm. "Miss Vance, you struck a pedestrian. You killed a companion animal. When the victim called you, begging for $800 to save the life you endangered, you hung up. That is the measure of your character." She scoffed, claiming she created jobs, paid taxes, and that Arthur contributed nothing. She spoke of her worth in millions, her time in thousands per minute. The courtroom seethed. I pronounced the verdict, guilty on all counts. Maximum fines, restitution to Arthur, and $85,000 to fund emergency surgeries for low-income pets. But that wasn't all. 90 days in the adult correctional institution and permanent revocation of her driver's license. The sound of the handcuffs clicking reverberated like thunder. Victoria screamed, her perfect composure shattered. "You can't do this. I have a gala tonight. I have a business to run." Arthur looked up from his chair, tears streaking his face. Relief washed over him. Justice had finally been served. Victoria Vance had never seen the world like this before. The walls of the adult correctional institution were cold, gray, and merciless. There was no silk, no designer handbags, no helicopters hovering over rooftops. Here, every minute was regimented, every action observed, every privilege stripped away. At first, she resisted. She refused to work, demanded to see the warden daily, and complained bitterly about the orange jumpsuit and plastic trays. But slowly, the prison routine began to pierce the armor of her arrogance. On the laundry detail, she was paired with Maria, a woman in her 40s serving time for shoplifting baby formula. Maria was weary, but kind, her eyes carrying decades of struggle. She shared stories of hardship, of nights spent hungry, of dreams that never came true. Victoria listened, initially with disdain, then with a hesitant curiosity she hadn't felt in her life. She began to see that wealth wasn't the measure of a person. She saw courage, resilience, and empathy where she had previously seen only poverty. And all the while, that 5 seconds of silence in the courtroom haunted her, Arthur Miller's face, Buddy's eyes, the weight of what she had done. 60 days in, Victoria sat alone at a scratched metal table and wrote a letter. The handwriting was shaky at first, but determination grew with every word. "Dear Judge Caprio, I hated you when you sentenced me. I wanted to destroy you. But sitting in this cell, I realized something terrifying. I have $600 million, and yet, I have no one who would cry for me the way Mr. Miller cried for his dog." She poured her heart into the letter, acknowledging the cruelty of her actions, the emptiness of her wealth, and the human lives she had affected. The letter ended with a hint of hope. A suggestion that she wanted to make amends, to restore some measure of justice beyond the courtroom. But how she would do that, she didn't yet know. Victoria's release day arrived, and she walked out of the gates a different person. No helicopter, no entourage, just a woman with a letter of apology and the weight of guilt pressing on her chest. Her first stop was Arthur Miller's small home. She knocked on the door, unsure if he would even open it. When Arthur did, the frailty of his frame was striking, and the framed photo of Buddy in his hands reminded her of the irreversible harm she caused. "I cannot bring Buddy back," she said softly, voice trembling. "But I want to ensure his memory lives on. I've established the Buddy Miller Emergency Vet Fund, with an endowment of $2 million. No senior citizen in Providence will ever have to watch a pet die because they cannot afford care." Arthur listened quietly, his expression unreadable at first. Slowly, he nodded, a gesture of cautious acceptance. "Do you think Victoria deserves a second chance? Could you forgive someone who caused such harm but then tried to make amends? Don't forget to comment where you are watching from." Back in my chambers, I reflected on the case. Wealth, influence, and power are all illusions if they cannot be measured against empathy, decency, and moral courage. Victoria Vance had learned this the hard way, and in her transformation, she reminded all of us that justice is not just punishment, it is accountability, growth, and redemption. If this story moved you, hit like, subscribe for more stories like this, and comment below. Tell me what justice means to you, and where you're watching from. Share your thoughts, your voice matters. And stay tuned, because the next story could challenge your beliefs about power, wealth, and humanity even more.